Welcome to A Gallon of Questions. I am Pat Gallen. Today with us, a columnist I'm sure you've read in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Perhaps you've picked up one of his books. He's also a host on 94 WIP. The book right here is a good one because I love dunks. It's called Magic in the Air, the Myth, the Mystery, the Soul of the Slam Dunk. Mike Sielski is here. What's up, Mike? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Cool book because, like you, I love the slam dunk. I always wanted a slam dunk. In high school, in a practice, I did it one time.
Oh, man.
So I'll always have that. Now, no one was around me. I just ran up to the rim and I got one through. But I'll always have that. But tell us about the book, why you wrote it, the idea behind it, all that good stuff.
Sure. So I did a book a few years ago called The Rise, all about Kobe Bryant.
Sure.
It was basically Kobe's origin story, and I was hunting around for another topic. And a buddy of mine, Tyler Kepner, Flowertown native, has covered Major League Baseball for the New York Times.
Outstanding,
and,
right?
Yeah, terrific. And The Athletic for years and years. Did a book called K, A History of Baseball in 10 Pitches.
Right.
And the format of the book was genius, I thought. He basically wrote the history of baseball through each pitch that a pitcher throws. So chapter 1 was all about the fastball, and chapter 2 was all about the curveball, and so on.
Yeah, it's a cool
and I
idea.
thought that was a really cool approach. So I started thinking in those terms for writing about basketball. And the more I thought about the history of the sport, the more it occurred to me that, like, all the big figures, or most of them anyway, or the big moments, had to do with somebody who played the game above the rim.
Sure.
Whether you're talking about Michael, Doc, Wilt, and Russell. And then the thing that really hooked me and made me think that this could work was reading up on the fact, and I had always known this, but I was never that curious about it, the fact that the dunk was banned in high school and college basketball for 9 years. And that's one of those things, I don't know if you feel this way, Pat, like you read it in a story or an internet post and you're like, well, yeah, of course. And then it's like, well, wait a minute.
Why?
Why? Who decided that would happen? How did this come to be? And I thought, okay, there's something here. And so I wanted to kind of write about the history of basketball and the history, in a way, of America and how America had changed kind of through this prism of the dunk.
It's funny you mention that because as soon as you said that, it reminded me of Footloose, where you couldn't dance, you can't dance, we can't dunk. What are you kidding me? It's just basketball. It's meant to be played in that way. And I guess at one point it wasn't.
There is a small town in Texas in this book too, so that's a perfect analogy.
Do you think we talk about Footloose today when you came in here? Probably not. But I'm interested in, like, you know, obviously, I don't want you to give too much away because you want people to buy this book. But, like, when people read a book, I don't know how many people think about what goes into creating this. So take us, like, you know, behind the curtain a little bit. When you come up with the idea and you start to put things on paper, like, what is that process like for you?
Well, the first thing with this one was I had to figure out what was going to be in the book and what the through line was going to be.
Yeah.
So, for instance, there isn't a lot of Darryl Dawkins in the book because what I ended up doing was kind of writing about this idea that the dunk was an engine of change in basketball and society. So I was attaching more significance to it than just like 350 pages worth of YouTube highlights. Right. So I needed, all right, Doc's got to be in there. Michael's got to be in there. Wilt and Russell and some of the old great schoolyard legends and a chapter on the band. I needed a modern player, so John Morant, and so on and so forth. And then it was going out and reporting each of those threads. So, for instance, I went to Murray, Kentucky, where John Morant went to college at Murray State, and spent 2 or 3 days there talking to people about Ja's impact at Murray State, because that's where he through dunking the ball, emerged as a superstar.
Sure.
I went to Amarillo, Texas, as part of my research, because there's a guy who was on the 1936 U.S. Olympic team who was credited with popularizing the dunk nationally, who grew up near Amarillo, Texas.
How about that?
Got Doc on the phone for an interview, talked to people who knew Wilt and Russell and so many of the other people involved. So, and then you just try to, I wanted each chapter to kind of stand on its own, but at the same time, connect in a way that took the reader on this journey through basketball and the country and the civil rights movement and all that kind of stuff.
Growing up in the 90s, and being a huge basketball fan here, you like aspire to be that kind of player, like an above the rim player. And there are only so many people in this world that can do that sort of thing. But it's become now almost like we've become bored by the slam dunk because we see it all the time, highlights, YouTube, whatever it might be. Did you feel that way in writing this book? Like, was there almost like we've become numb to these guys being just so athletic?
I didn't feel that way writing it, but I agree with you completely that we are at that stage in basketball. I think that's part of the reason that Mac McClung participates in the dunk contest and why people are drawn to him.
Exactly what I was thinking about.
You know, he's a 6'2" white dude, and so just by his appearance, he like counteracts all those stereotypes that we have about who should be able to dunk. And then when he does it, it looks like it's, what's the right way to put it? It doesn't look so easy for him to do it. We can't believe that he's doing it. The players nowadays are so big and so fast and so talented and so athletic. And we've spent so much time watching Michael and Julius and Dominique and all these guys that I think you're right, Pat. I think there's an element of like, we've seen this all before. And I think it's taken away something from the NBA. I really do. I think when you're talking about the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s, that's when pro basketball like captured the imagination of people in this country.
So this is your
fourth book.
Fourth book.
Yeah.
Talk about the Kobe book, The Rise, because, you know, obviously you do it right after he passes away. And within that, I'm sure you realized like just how the depth of how much he meant to so many people, not only across this country, but really worldwide.
Yeah. I wanted to do his origin story. I wanted to do Batman Begins for the Black Mamba. And the advantage I had, and you said it, Pat, is that most of the country, I don't think, appreciated how much Kobe mattered to the Philadelphia area. They saw him as a kid who kind of sprouted fully formed out of a hill in Hollywood because he joined the Lakers so young. And everybody felt like he grew up before their eyes. The good stuff, the bad stuff, all of it. But you know from growing up in the area, and I know, and a lot of people from this region know, that there was this earlier story about him living in Italy and being Joe Bryant's son and Pam Bryant's son and taking Brandy to the senior prom and, you know, taking his talent to the NBA and not going to college and leading Lower Merion to the state championship. That's an amazing story that few people outside of our area know and know well. So I was really drawn in by the opportunity to tell that.
When you started to dig in, was there anything that, because he was such a larger than life character that you almost feel like you know this guy so well through the media lens, was there anything that you learned in the process of making the book that you were like, that's unbelievable, I didn't know that?
Yeah. I learned some interesting factual things, like he played baseball in 8th grade and soccer and
didn't know that.
was in the Black Student Union organization at Lower Merion, like kind of trying to figure out who he was. But the thing that knocked my socks off was how he knew in his bones at an early age, I'm going to be great, and I know how to be great, and I'm willing to put in the time and the effort to be great. My favorite anecdote in that whole book, he and his buddy, Anthony Gilbert, would go around to playgrounds in and around the city and play. And Kobe would, work on his footwork and shoot threes and pull-ups, and Anthony would rebound for him, and he would scream at him the whole time. Like, you stink. You couldn't play in the public league, like yelling at him because Kobe wanted him to. Because Kobe knew, I'm coming out of Lower Merion. I've got to prepare myself to play against the best players in Philly and the best players around the country, and I got to be mentally tough. So at 15, 16, he's got one of his buddies screaming at him to kind of get that armor on him so that nobody can intimidate him on the court.
I've always been struck by Kobe, maybe more than any other professional athlete, in that you look at the course that he took, it almost seemed like a sickness, like an itch that he just could never scratch. The depth that he would go to figure out this greatness. He was intimidating. He was incredible. But I've just always, every time I've read about him or seen an interview with him or clearly watched him, just like the level that he would go to become that kind of person is like, I don't know if there's any other way to put it, a sickness.
Yeah, no, it's what they talked about in that documentary about the Redeem Team, the 2008 Olympic team, right? When LeBron and Melo and D-Wade are coming back from the club at 4 o'clock in the morning and they see Kobe in the hotel lobby and he's already gotten a workout in. And, hey, guys, how you doing? And he's going to do his second workout of the day. And they're like, oh, now we get it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and until you're around him and talk to people who knew him at those early stages, you can't appreciate how much in his bones that kind of mindset was.
All right, so you got 4 books down. You got anything
Yeah,
cooking for
I
what's
do.
next? Yeah.
So
You never sleep, do you? You never. Come on,
dude.
the brain's always moving.
You have kids. I have kids. Nobody who has kids ever sleeps.
No.
So yeah, my next project is I'm working on my next book, which will be about the making of the movie Rocky.
Oh.
We're coming up on the 50th anniversary in 2026 of the release of
Yeah.
the film, and so I'm going to tell the story about how the movie got made, what Sylvester Stallone did to make it come to fruition, its connections to Philly, all the cool little stories.
When you do a story, are you setting out? Is it the same mindset as writing a book? Do you look at things in the same
It depends
the same
on
lens?
It depends on what I'm writing. If I'm doing a in-depth narrative story about something or someone, yes, it's very similar. If I'm writing a column, if I'm praising Saquon Barkley or AJ Brown, or maybe being a little critical of Nick Sirianni for the way he interacts with the fans after a game,
Yep.
that's a little bit different because you only have 800 to 1,000 words to work with. You better get to your point quick. And you know this, Philly fans, they don't want to mess around. They want you to get to the point, and they want to know where you're coming from. And so it's not as much storytelling as it is, okay, I've got to kind of hit them in the face right away with what I think and why I think it. So a column is a little bit different from a longer form kind of piece.
Do you think things have become, in the 11 years you've been there, easier to come up with good topics than when you started? Harder, yeah, really.
Yeah, because the access is limited to the athletes and the
fair
coaches.
enough, yeah.
I mean, I can remember back in the way back in the day when, if you covered the Eagles, for instance, you had 45 minutes of availability on a random Wednesday before they practiced. You could go in the locker room, hang out.
Sure, yeah.
And then if you wanted to, they would finish practice and they'd let you back in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be fewer media people there. And you could sit with Brian Dawkins or Troy Vincent and just talk for as long as you wanted.
Yeah.
And now throughout pro sports, especially with social media, like all of these athletes, I think, look at us with their guard up. They're like, how can you help me? I don't think you can help me.
Mm-hmm.
You can really only hurt me.
Right.
And teams now limit how much interaction we get with them anyway.
How much then do you try to, it's not your job to help or hurt them, it's your job to write a story, but when you know that, when access becomes more and more limited, how do you try to balance that where, you might have to write a negative story one day, but let's try to write something more positive the next day? How do you balance
No,
all
I
those?
don't do that. I write what I think and what I feel. I'm not conscientious of that necessarily.
Sure.
But I try to be as upfront ahead of time as I can. If I'm going to be critical of someone, I try my best to make a good faith effort to let them know what's coming.
Sure.
Or if I want to press them about something, I'll say, look, this is my job. I got to ask you about this.
Yep.
And so let's get into the sensitive topic. And generally speaking, they respond pretty well to that.
I agree.
I don't think I'm a hot take guy. So,
No, I wouldn't say that. No, even for a radio, you're doing radio now,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
can
but
kind of
that's-
bleed into that. But I would agree with you.
yeah, and that radio show, what Glenn Macnow and Ray Dittinger did with that show was not hot taking at all.
Right.
And so Rob Ellis and I want to continue that
Sure.
tradition and not be that way. But I think that kind of goes into it. I'm not trying to write something just for the sake of getting clicks or gaining attention or pissing someone off. I just want to write something that I think is true.
Talk more about the radio side of things and how being a columnist has kind of set you up for that, and having to take over for, of course, like one of the greatest of all time, and Ray Dittinger.
That was intimidating.
Yeah,
I mean,
no pressure.
Ray's got Joel Embiid size shoes, needless to say.
Yeah.
But Glenn was wonderful. I couldn't have asked for a better partner to help with the transition.
Sure.
And nobody's going to be Ray Dittinger.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of have to be yourself as best you can. And I listened to that show every Saturday.
Of course, yeah.
When I was driving my kids to practice or appointments or whatever. And so I was drawn to it anyway. And when Glenn asked me, I was totally honored. And now that Rob and I are working together, I think it's very similar. We're kind of cut from the same cloth, the same mindset. We want to be a little smarter, maybe a little funnier, not yell and scream, not make mountains out of molehills, that kind of thing. Just be knowledgeable and entertaining.
One of the cool things earlier when I first got to CBS, I did some stuff for WIP, and I got a chance to host with Ray during it was a pre-draft show.
Oh, man.
And to see Ray
right in his wheelhouse,
his yellow notepad filled with I couldn't even tell what was in there, but it was just like, watching a chef make a cake, or a baker make a cake or something like that. It was just really impressive, and I'm glad that I get to say that I did that before he ended up retiring. What do you learn from guys like that?
That you can do this job in the way that you do it, and the way I try to do it, which is you can be yourself, but you don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to seek attention. You don't have to push yourself to say and do things that make yourself the center of attention.
Sure.
And that can be a hard feeling to fight, because the reaction that you are seeking, it's easy to get the hit, the high of saying something on social media and getting an immediate reaction. And you have to remind yourself that there are tons of people out there reading and listening or watching who aren't weighing in, who just watch you and like what you do, and you're never going to know that.
Sure.
And if you start to veer from that and be something that you're not, or try to play a part, you're going to turn those people off, and you're not going to be able to put your head on the pillow at night.
What we do here, maybe you've seen this, it's the Gallen can.
Okay.
Sometimes I walk around with it like a grown man. There are questions in here. They're all random.
All right, great.
We'll try to knock them out before we
Let's
finish
do it.
up.
Okay.
Hop in there. Nothing you can't handle, I promise.
All right. Best story you've written.
Do you have a favorite? Do you think there's a best? Don't lie, there is.
I have a couple.
Okay.
I did a column about my older son about 10 years ago now, a little more than that. When he was almost 3, he was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. Okay. Now, he's come a long, long way since then, but at the time, it was a hard thing for my wife and me to hear. Sure. And at the same time we got that diagnosis, he was completely infatuated with the Phillies. And he knew every player, every number of every player. And I ended up writing about his love for the Phillies, while at the same time I'm covering them and writing about them from a quasi-objective standpoint.
Sure,
I'm basically writing like it's time for them to move on from Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley and Ryan Howard. Meanwhile, he's like, I love those guys and want to see them play all the time.
Dad, don't run them out of town.
Exactly. So that one stands out, I'd say.
Wow, that's really cool. Very, very cool. All right, let's see. The story you set out to do that took the most unexpected turn.
Whoa. That's a really good question. Most unexpected turn.
You were like, I'm doing this, and then it just went off the rails, or completely changed the way
when you say going off the rails, like writing about Jake Voracek of the Flyers.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe some people remember that.
Yeah, I'd written a column about him back in 2019 that was critical of him and a few other guys on the team, and Jake wasn't happy with it. And 2 years later, when we were still coming out of the pandemic and all the press conferences were on Zoom, I asked him a question on Zoom, and he hit me pretty good, and it went viral. And that comes with the territory. But I had always thought Jake and I had a pretty good relationship up till then, so that really caught me off guard. That he said what he said.
Did you speak after that?
No. I offered to speak to him and went through Zach Hill, who was the PR guy for the Flyers at the time, and we never cleared the air.
Sometimes it happens.
Hey,
man.
it's the way it goes. Comes with the territory.
Sure does.
What will happen to the Big Five? Oh, talk about a topic near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I think what will happen to it largely depends on what the schools within it decide to do with respect to basketball. I think a lot of them, I think Villanova has staked its claim, right? They brought in a guy who's coached at a few different places, has no connections to the university. Couldn't say that about Kyle Neptune, couldn't say that about Jay Wright. I mean, they'd had 4 coaches in 50 years. But they're basically saying like, okay, we are part of the machinery. We're in the Big East. We're going to try to compete in the Big East. We get a coach, Kevin Willard, who has coached at Seton Hall and Maryland, and we think he can win. Okay, that's what Villanova is going to be.
Yeah.
Temple, St. Joe's, LaSalle, and Penn have to decide, what are they going to be? Is Penn going to spend money to compete in the Ivy League? Is Temple going to decide what kind of athletics department they're going to have? They've been chasing football for so long, and it's still not a good program, and you've damaged your basketball program in the process.
Right.
Never mind LaSalle and St. Joe's in terms of, can they afford, do they have the alumni bases to be able to do pay for play and NIL in that regard? So I think it's a real tenuous time for the City Series. I really do.
It's a bummer. It's a bummer. Love to see that stick around.
Yeah.
It means so much to so many people. Let's see if we can cruise through a few. Favorite book of all time?
The Sneetches and Other Stories by Dr. Seuss.
All right. Going way back.
It was my
like
favorite
that.
when I was a kid,
I love
and
that.
I still love it.
If not a sports writer, what would you be doing?
Probably a college professor or teacher.
Okay. All right, last one. Last game you attended as a fan.
Oh gosh, went to a Phillies game last year with my extended family.
Okay, cool.
We go to once a year, like all my aunts, uncles, cousins on my mom's side, all from Northeast Philly.
Nice.
And the Phillies won. It was an afternoon game, and they all stood up and cheered, and I stood up with them and kept my hands on my side because I can't cheer anymore.
Golf clap.
I wish I could, but I can't.
Mike, we really appreciate you coming in. Good luck with the book. Looks great. Can't wait to read it. Appreciate
Pat,
you, my
I
friend.
really appreciate this, man. Thank you so much.